The fluorescent lights above made everything look sickly white as Amani Carter opened her eyes, her head pounding like someone was hammering inside her skull. Something was wrong. Very wrong. The paper gown stuck to her skin with cold sweat, and there was a sharp, persistent ache in her lower abdomen that definitely wasn't there when she'd signed in 3 hours ago for what was supposed to be a simple blood draw. "Miss Carter? How are you feeling?" The nurse's voice sounded too cheerful, too forced, like she was trying to cover something up. Amani tried to sit up, but the room spun. "What happened to me? I thought I was just here for the hormone study. You know, the one where you take blood samples to see how my body responds to different fertility hormones over time." The nurse's smile flickered. "Let me get Dr. Harrison for you." That's when Amani knew something had gone terribly wrong. She was supposed to be in and out of the Chicago Reproductive Health Center in 30 minutes. Easy money for a broke graduate student who needed every dollar to keep her and her disabled mother afloat. The study promised $500 for 6 months of blood work, no procedures, no injections, just monitoring how her healthy 26-year-old body naturally processed hormones. But here she was, 3 hours later, feeling like she'd been hit by a truck and hollowed out from the inside. Dr. Harrison walked in looking like he'd aged 10 years since this morning. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, and his hands shook slightly as he pulled up a chair beside her bed. "Amani, I need you to stay calm while I explain what happened." Her heart started racing. "What do you mean, what happened?" "I signed up for blood work. That's it. Just blood work for the fertility hormone study. There's been a complication. A technical error in our system." Dr. Harrison's voice cracked. "This morning, during a software update, 2 patient identification codes were accidentally overwritten. Your code and another patient's code got switched in our database." The room felt like it was closing in on her. "What does that mean? In plain English, what does that mean? Instead of the hormone monitoring procedure you signed up for, you received an IVF embryo transfer procedure that was scheduled for another patient." The words hit her like ice water. "You did what to me? I know this sounds impossible, but due to the system error, you were brought into the procedure room instead of the monitoring room. The medical team followed the instructions in the computer system, which showed you were scheduled for embryo transfer." Amani's voice came out as barely a whisper. "You put someone else's baby inside me? The embryo was created using donor sperm and was intended for a different patient entirely. I cannot express how sorry." "Get it out." The words tore from her throat. "Get it out of me right now. Amani, please, let me explain the full situation." "I said get it out." She tried to stand up, but her legs gave out. The nurse caught her arm, but Amani yanked away. "I never consented to this. I'm a virgin. I've never even— How could you do this to me?" Dr. Harrison's face went completely white. You've never been sexually active?" Did I stutter? "I came here for blood work to help pay my mother's medical bills and you? She couldn't even finish the sentence. The violation felt so complete, so devastating that words seemed meaningless. "We need to discuss your options." "My options?" Amani's voice rose to a shout. "You took away all my options when you put someone else's baby inside me without my consent. How is this even possible? How do you accidentally perform surgery on the wrong person?" The nurse stepped forward. "Miss Carter, I know you're upset, but we need to monitor you for the next few hours to make sure there are no immediate complications from the procedure." "Complications?" Amani laughed, but it sounded more like sobbing. "The complication is that you violated my body. The complication is that I'm a 26-year-old virgin who just had someone else's genetic material put inside her without permission." Dr. Harrison rubbed his face with both hands. "I understand your anger. This is an unprecedented situation. Our legal team is already involved, and we will cover all medical expenses related to this incident. We can discuss termination procedures if that's what you choose." "If that's what I choose?" Amani's voice dropped to a deadly whisper. "You think this is about choice now? You already made the choice for me when you stuck that needle in my arm and knocked me unconscious. The sedation was standard for the procedure you were mistakenly scheduled for." "Stop." Amani held up her hand. "Just stop talking. I need to think. I need to breathe. I need to figure out how my life just got completely destroyed in one afternoon." She looked around the sterile room that had become the scene of the worst day of her life. 3 hours ago, she was a struggling graduate student with a clear path forward. Get her master's degree in social work, find a good job, take care of her mother. Simple. Hard but simple. Now she was carrying a stranger's baby, put there by doctors who couldn't tell the difference between a blood draw and artificial insemination. Whose sperm is it? She asked quietly. Dr. Harrison and the nurse exchanged glances. That information is confidential. The donor has rights to privacy. Privacy? Amani's voice cracked. He has rights to privacy, but I don't have rights to my own body? I don't have the right to know whose genetic material you forced into me? It's complicated. There are legal protections. Everything's complicated now, isn't it? Amani closed her eyes, trying to process the impossible situation. I need to call my mother. I need to go home. I need to pretend this never happened. But even as she said it, she knew that was impossible. Whatever was growing inside her now, if anything was growing inside her, had already changed everything. The life she'd planned, the careful balance she'd maintained between school and caregiving, the simple dream of helping other families while building her own someday, all of it was gone, replaced by a nightmare that started with a computer glitch and ended with her body being used without her consent. As she finally managed to stand up on shaking legs, one thought kept echoing in her mind. How do you move forward when your entire life gets rewritten in a single afternoon by someone else's mistake? 3 weeks had passed since that horrible day at the clinic, and Amani had almost convinced herself it was all a nightmare. She'd thrown herself into her studies, spending 18-hour days at the library working on her thesis about family systems in crisis. The irony wasn't lost on her. But her body had other plans. It started with the exhaustion. Not the usual tired from staying up too late exhaustion, but a bone-deep weariness that made even brushing her teeth feel like running a marathon. Then came the nausea, hitting her in waves that left her gripping the bathroom sink at 3 a.m., dry heaving until her ribs ached. "Baby girl, you look terrible," her mother, Rose, said from her wheelchair as Amani stumbled into the kitchen. "You eating enough? You been studying too hard again?" Amani forced a smile as she poured her mother's morning coffee. "I'm fine, Mama. Just stressed about school." But she wasn't fine. Her breasts were tender, her sense of smell had gone crazy, the neighbor's coffee made her sick, her own shampoo smelled like chemicals, and even her mother's perfume was overwhelming. Still, she told herself it was stress. Graduate school stress. Caregiver stress. Money stress. Anything but the alternative. The breaking point came on a Tuesday morning when she couldn't keep down even water. She'd been vomiting for 2 hours straight, and Rose had threatened to call 911 if Amani didn't go to the emergency room. "It's probably just a stomach bug," Amani insisted, but her voice was weak. "Stomach bug doesn't last 3 weeks, honey. You going to the doctor today, or I'm calling your cousin Patricia to drag you there herself." The threat of involving Patricia, who had no filter and even less patience, was enough to get Amani moving. She dragged herself to the campus health center, figuring they'd give her some anti-nausea medication and send her home. Dr. Kim, a young resident who looked like she hadn't slept in days, ran through the usual questions. "When was your last period? Any chance you could be pregnant? Any recent changes in diet or stress levels?" "I can't be pregnant," Amani said automatically. "I've never been sexually active." Dr. Kim paused in her note-taking. "Never? Okay, but sometimes there can be other causes of missed periods. Let's run some tests just to rule everything out." The pregnancy test felt like a formality. Amani sat in the bathroom stall, staring at the plastic stick, thinking about her thesis deadline and whether she had enough groceries for the week. She wasn't even nervous. Until the second line appeared. Dark. Unmistakable. Positive. "That's impossible," she whispered to the empty bathroom. "That's completely impossible." She stared at the test for 10 minutes, waiting for the line to disappear, waiting for reality to reassert itself. But the line stayed there, bold and accusing. Dr. Kim's face went through several expressions when Amani handed over the test. Confusion, concern, then careful professionalism. "Amani, I need to ask you some difficult questions. Are you sure you've never been sexually active? Sometimes people have different definitions." "I'm sure." Amani's voice was steady, but inside she was screaming. "I'm a 26-year-old virgin who has never done anything more intimate than hold hands. This test is wrong. We can run a blood test to confirm, but urine tests are pretty accurate. Is there any chance? Have you been unconscious recently? Any medical procedures? The clinic? The mistake?" The afternoon that she tried so hard to forget came flooding back. "Oh my God." Amani's hands started shaking. "Oh my God, they actually did it?" "Did what?" "Amani, what happened?" The whole story came pouring out. The fertility study, the computer error, the procedure she never consented to. Dr. Kim's eyes got wider with each detail. "You're telling me a fertility clinic accidentally performed IVF on you instead of taking blood samples?" "That's exactly what I'm telling you." Amani felt sick again, but this time it wasn't morning sickness. They said there was a system error. 2 patient codes got mixed up. I hoped nothing would come of it. I thought maybe the procedure failed. Jesus. Dr. Kim sat back in her chair. Amani, this is malpractice on a massive scale. Have you spoken to a lawyer? I can't afford a lawyer. I can barely afford groceries. Amani's voice cracked. And what would be the point? The damage is already done. The point would be that they violated your body without consent and completely changed your life. That clinic needs to be held accountable. But Amani was barely listening. She was thinking about her mother, who had sacrificed everything to raise her after her father left. She was thinking about her thesis, her degree, her plans to help other families navigate crisis situations. She was thinking about how ironic it was that she was now living in the biggest family crisis of her life. I need to go home, she said quietly. Amani, we need to discuss your options. There are choices you can make. I know what my choices are. Amani stood up, her legs still shaky. But right now, I just need to go home and figure out how to tell my disabled mother that her daughter is pregnant with a stranger's baby because of a computer glitch. The drive home was a blur. Amani sat in her 10-year-old Honda, gripping the steering wheel and trying to process the impossible reality. She was pregnant. Actually, literally pregnant with a baby that belonged to some anonymous sperm donor who had probably paid thousands of dollars for the IVF procedure that was supposed to go to another woman. Rose was waiting in the living room when Amani walked in, her wheelchair positioned to see the front door. Well, what did the doctor say? Amani looked at her mother, the strongest woman she knew, who had worked double shifts as a nurse until a car accident left her paralyzed, who had never once complained about their situation, who had always put Amani's needs first. Mama, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. We need to talk. The conversation that followed was the hardest of Amani's life. Rose's face went through the same cycle of emotions that Dr. Kim's had: disbelief, confusion, anger, and finally, a fierce protectiveness that reminded Amani why she loved her mother so much. Those people are going to pay for what they did to you, Rose said, her voice steady and dangerous. And if they think they can brush this under the rug, they got another thing coming. Mama, I don't want to fight them. I just want to figure out what to do next. What you're going to do next is call that clinic and demand answers. You're going to find out whose baby you're carrying and what they plan to do about this mess they created. Amani sank into the couch beside her mother's wheelchair. I'm scared, Mama. I don't know how to be pregnant. I don't know how to be a mother. I was supposed to help other people with their family problems, not create a family crisis of my own. Rose reached over and took her daughter's hand. Baby girl, nobody knows how to be a mother until they become one. And whatever happens, whatever you decide, I'm going to be right here with you. That night, lying in her childhood bed staring at the ceiling, Amani placed her hand on her still flat stomach. Was there really a baby growing in there? A tiny person who existed because of a computer error and a series of medical mistakes? The thought was overwhelming, but as she lay there in the dark, one thing became clear. Whatever happened next, she needed answers. She needed to know whose genetic material was inside her, and she needed to know what the clinic planned to do about the biggest mistake of her life. Tomorrow she would call Dr. Harrison and demand the truth. Tonight, she would let herself grieve for the simple life she'd lost and try to imagine the complicated future she never asked for. Ethan Blake was reviewing quarterly reports in his corner office on the 40th floor when his assistant knocked on the door with an expression he'd never seen before. Rebecca had worked for him for 5 years, had seen him through the worst days after his wife's death, and nothing ever seemed to rattle her. But today she looked like she'd seen a ghost. Mr. Blake, I have Dr. Martinez from Chicago Reproductive Health on line 1. He says it's urgent. Ethan's stomach dropped. He'd been working with the clinic for months, preparing for the surrogacy arrangement that would fulfill his late wife's dream of having a child. Sarah had wanted children desperately, but cancer had taken that possibility away along with everything else. Before she died, she'd made him promise to have the family they'd planned, even if she couldn't be there to share it. Put him through. Dr. Martinez's voice was strained, professional but clearly shaken. Mr. Blake, I'm calling about your surrogacy arrangement. There's been a serious complication. Is Emma okay? Emma was the surrogate they'd carefully selected, a 30-year-old mother of 2 who wanted to help other families while earning money for her children's education. Emma is fine. The problem is that your genetic material was not transferred to Emma as scheduled. Ethan sat up straighter. What do you mean it wasn't transferred? The procedure was supposed to happen 3 weeks ago. It did happen 3 weeks ago. But due to a catastrophic system error, your genetic material was transferred to the wrong patient. The words didn't make sense. Ethan had built his tech company by understanding systems, by preventing exactly these kinds of errors. How is that possible? You have multiple safeguards, patient identification protocols, all of which failed during a software update that corrupted our patient database. Mr. Blake, I cannot express how sorry we are. This has never happened in our clinic's history. So where? Ethan's voice trailed off as the full implication hit him. Where did my genetic material go? Another patient received your embryo by mistake. A woman who was supposed to be participating in a research study, not undergoing any procedures. Ethan stood up so fast his chair rolled backward. You performed IVF on someone without their consent. The patient was sedated for what she believed was a blood draw. Due to the system error, she was brought to the procedure room instead of the monitoring room. The medical team followed the computer's instructions. Jesus Christ. Ethan started pacing, his mind racing through the legal and ethical nightmare this represented. Is she okay? Does she know what happened? She's been informed. And Mr. Blake, there's more. The procedure was successful. She's pregnant. The phone slipped in Ethan's suddenly sweaty hand. Somewhere in Chicago, a complete stranger was carrying his child, a child created with Sarah's frozen eggs, a child that was supposed to be their legacy, their hope. I need her name. Mr. Blake, patient confidentiality. Patient confidentiality? Ethan's voice rose to a shout. She's carrying my child because of your massive incompetence, and you're talking about confidentiality? I understand your frustration, but we have legal obligations. Your legal obligations should have prevented this from happening in the first place. Ethan was fully shouting now, 3 weeks of carefully controlled grief and hope colliding with this impossible situation. I need to know who she is. I need to know what she plans to do. This is my child we're talking about. Mr. Blake, please understand that this woman is also a victim in this situation. She never consented to any of this. The words hit Ethan like a physical blow. In his shock and anger, he'd been thinking about his own loss, his own violated expectations. But somewhere out there was a woman whose entire life had been changed without her permission. You're right. He sat down heavily. How is she handling this? About as well as you'd expect. She's very upset, very confused. She's a graduate student with no financial resources to deal with a situation like this. I'll pay for everything. Medical expenses, living expenses, whatever she needs. That's generous, but it's more complicated than money. She has decisions to make about the pregnancy, and those decisions affect your child. Ethan closed his eyes, thinking about Sarah's face when they'd first talked about having children. She'd been so excited, so full of plans and dreams. Even when the cancer took away her ability to carry a child, she'd held on to the hope that they could still have a family someday. I want to meet her. Mr. Blake, I don't think that's advisable. The situation is already complicated enough. She's carrying my child. My wife's genetic legacy. I need to meet her. Dr. Martinez was quiet for a long moment. I'll need to speak with her first. She has to agree to any contact. What's her name? Another pause. Her name is Amani Carter. After Ethan hung up, he sat in his office staring out at the Chicago skyline, trying to process what he'd just learned. Somewhere in this city was a woman named Amani Carter who was carrying the child he and Sarah had dreamed of, the child that was supposed to heal some of the devastating loss of the past 2 years. But this wasn't healing. This was another kind of trauma, another violation of the natural order of things. Sarah had died at 28, and now a stranger was carrying their child because of a computer error. He thought about calling his lawyer, his PR team, his board of directors. This situation had the potential to destroy everything he'd built, to turn his private grief into public scandal. But first, he needed to understand what Amani Carter was going through. He needed to know what kind of person she was, what she planned to do, how he could help make right what the clinic had made so terribly wrong. Rebecca knocked again. Mr. Blake? Your 3 o'clock is here. Cancel it. Cancel everything for the rest of the week. Sir? Ethan looked at his assistant, this woman who had helped him navigate the worst period of his life with such grace and competence. Rebecca, I need you to find everything you can about a woman named Amani Carter. Graduate student, probably at one of the local universities. And I need you to reschedule my meetings for the next few days. Is everything okay? Ethan thought about how to answer that question. Nothing had been okay since Sarah died. His success, his wealth, his carefully constructed life, none of it meant anything without her. The surrogacy had been his way of keeping some part of her alive, of honoring the dreams they'd shared. Now those dreams were growing inside a stranger who never asked for any of this. No, he said quietly. Nothing's okay. But maybe we can figure out how to make it better. As Rebecca left to start her research, Ethan turned back to the window. The Chicago skyline stretched out before him, millions of people living their lives, facing their own challenges and complications. Somewhere out there, Amani Carter was dealing with the biggest complication imaginable. And somehow, they were going to have to figure out how to navigate this impossible situation together. The thought terrified him almost as much as it gave him hope. The conference room at Hendricks, Patterson and Associates looked like it was designed to intimidate people. Polished mahogany table, leather chairs that probably cost more than Amani's car, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown Chicago. Even the water glasses looked expensive. Amani sat between her hastily hired lawyer, a young public defender named Tom Walsh who specialized in medical malpractice and tried not to let her nervousness show. Across the table sat 3 lawyers in suits that could have funded her mother's physical therapy for a year, and at the head of the table, the man whose genetic material was currently growing inside her. Ethan Blake looked exactly like she'd expected and nothing like she'd imagined. The internet photos showed a typical tech billionaire, confident, polished, always wearing the same expression of controlled success. But the man sitting across from her looked tired, older than his 32 years, with grief written in the lines around his eyes. "Miss Carter," he said, and his voice was quieter than she'd expected. "Thank you for agreeing to meet." Amani nodded, not trusting her voice. "What exactly did you say to the man whose baby you were accidentally carrying?" Dr. Martinez sat to Ethan's right, looking like he'd aged 10 years in the past month. "Before we begin, I want to reiterate that the clinic takes full responsibility for this unprecedented error. We're prepared to cover all medical expenses and provide compensation for." "Can we just cut through the legal speak?" Amani interrupted. "I didn't come here for money. I came here because I need to understand what happened and what you people expect me to do about it." One of Ethan's lawyers leaned forward. "Miss Carter, this is obviously a delicate situation. We're prepared to offer a substantial settlement in exchange for your agreement to certain terms regarding the pregnancy." "What kind of terms?" The lawyer glanced at Ethan, who shook his head slightly. "We can discuss those details privately." "No." Amani's voice was steady. "If you want to discuss terms about my body and my pregnancy, you can discuss them in front of me. I'm not signing anything I don't understand." Ethan cleared his throat. "Could we have a moment alone? Just Miss Carter and myself?" The lawyers on both sides started protesting immediately, but Ethan held up his hand. "Please. This isn't a negotiation. I just want to talk to her." After several minutes of whispered arguments, the room cleared, leaving Amani and Ethan alone at the massive table. "I'm sorry," he said immediately. "For all of this. For what the clinic did to you, for what I'm about to ask you, for the position you're in because of my decision to use this clinic." Amani studied his face, looking for signs of manipulation or hidden agendas. But all she saw was exhaustion and genuine regret. "What are you about to ask me?" Ethan took a deep breath. "The embryo that was transferred to you was created using my late wife's eggs. She died of cancer 2 years ago, but before she died we went through several rounds of IVF and froze embryos. This baby..." His voice cracked slightly. "This baby is the only chance I have to have a child with her." The room went completely silent. Amani felt something shift inside her chest, a recognition of grief that matched what she saw in Ethan's eyes. "I'm not asking you to be a surrogate," he continued. "I'm not trying to take the baby away from you. I need you to know what this means to me. And I need to know what it means to you." Amani placed her hand on her still flat stomach, a gesture that was becoming automatic. "I don't know what it means to me yet. A month ago, I was a virgin who had never even thought about having children. Now I'm pregnant with a stranger's baby, and everyone wants me to make decisions I never expected to face. What do you want to do?" The question was so simple and so impossible. "I don't know. I keep waiting for someone to tell me what the right thing is, but there is no right thing. There's just a bunch of wrong circumstances that led to an impossible situation." Ethan leaned forward. "Can I tell you about Sarah? About my wife?" Amani nodded. "She was a teacher. 3rd grade. She loved children so much that she volunteered at weekend literacy programs and coached soccer for kids whose parents couldn't afford league fees. When we found out she had cancer, the first thing she asked the doctor was whether she'd still be able to have children." His voice was steady, but Amani could see the pain in his eyes. "We did 3 rounds of IVF while she was going through chemotherapy, trying to preserve as many embryos as possible. She was so sick, but she never complained because she said our future children were worth any amount of suffering. Amani felt tears building in her throat. She sounds like she was an amazing person. She was. And this baby you're carrying is part of her. The last part of her that I can still hold on to. They sat in silence for several minutes, the weight of the situation settling between them like something physical. What would she want? Amani asked quietly. If your wife could see what happened, what would she want? Ethan smiled for the first time since she'd met him. She'd want everyone to be okay. She'd want the baby to be healthy and loved. She'd want you to have choices and support and whatever you needed to make the decision that felt right to you. Even if that decision was to end the pregnancy? Ethan's smile faltered, but he nodded. Even then. Sarah always said that forced parenthood wasn't really parenthood at all. Amani felt something loosen in her chest, some tension she hadn't even realized she was carrying. Everyone keeps telling me what I should do, what I have to do, what my options are. But you're the first person who's asked me what I want. So what do you want? Amani closed her eyes, trying to access some inner wisdom she wasn't sure she possessed. I want to do the right thing. But I don't know what that is yet. That's okay. You don't have to know right now. Can I ask you something? Anything. If I decide to continue this pregnancy, what do you expect from me? From the baby? Ethan was quiet for a long time. I expect nothing. I hope for everything. But I understand that this is your body, your life, your decision. Whatever you choose, I'll support it. And if I choose to keep the baby after it's born? Then you'll be its mother, and I'll be grateful that Sarah's genetic legacy gets to live in the world. What if I choose to give the baby to you? Then I'll spend the rest of my life making sure that child knows how much its biological mother and its genetic mother both loved it. Amani opened her eyes and looked at this man who had lost so much and was asking for so little. I need time to think. Of course. Take all the time you need. And I need to know that whatever decision I make, you'll respect it completely. You have my word. As the lawyers filed back into the room, Amani felt something she hadn't experienced since this whole nightmare began. A sense that maybe somehow they could figure this out together. It wouldn't be easy and it wouldn't be conventional, but for the first time since she'd seen that positive pregnancy test, she felt like she wasn't facing this alone. 2 weeks after their first meeting, Amani was surprised to find herself looking forward to seeing Ethan again. They'd agreed to meet for coffee somewhere neutral, somewhere without lawyers hovering over every word. The little cafe near Northwestern's campus was busy with students and professors, the kind of place where a tech billionaire and a graduate student could blend into the background. Ethan was already there when she arrived, sitting in a corner booth with 2 cups of tea and looking remarkably normal in jeans and a sweater. I wasn't sure if you still drank coffee, he said as she sat down. I read that caffeine can be problematic during pregnancy. Amani was touched that he'd thought about it. Herbal tea is perfect. Thank you. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching students hurry past with backpacks and laptops. It felt surreal, 2 people thrown together by the most unlikely circumstances, trying to figure out how to navigate the next 8 months. How are you feeling? Ethan asked. Physically? Terrible. The morning sickness is actually all-day sickness, and I'm so tired I fell asleep in the library yesterday and woke up drooling on my thesis notes. Ethan smiled. And emotionally? Amani considered the question. Less panicked than I was 2 weeks ago. I've been seeing a counselor at the student health center, and she's helping me work through everything. What about you? How are you handling all this? Honestly, it's the first time since Sarah died that I've felt hopeful, I guess. Even though none of this is what we planned, there's still going to be a baby. Part of her is going to exist in the world. Amani watched his face as he spoke about his wife. There was love there, deep and enduring, but also acceptance. He wasn't trying to replace Sarah or recreate his lost future. He was trying to honor what they'd had while building something new from the pieces. Can I ask you something that might be too personal? After everything we're going through together, I think we're past normal boundaries. Do you think Sarah would be okay with this? With you caring about what happens to me and the baby? Ethan's smile was soft and sad. Sarah had the biggest heart of anyone I've ever known. She would have been worried about you from the moment she found out what happened. She probably would have shown up at your door with groceries and baby books and a list of questions about how you were feeling. The image made Amani laugh despite herself. She sounds like someone I would have liked. She would have loved you. She always said that the strongest people were the ones who kept going even when life threw them impossible situations. They talked for 2 hours, conversation flowing easier than Amani had expected. Ethan told her about his company, about the technology they were developing to help small businesses compete with larger corporations. Amani talked about her thesis, about her work with families in crisis, about her mother's accident and how it had changed their relationship. Your mother sounds incredible, Ethan said after Amani finished telling him about Rose's determination to finish nursing school even after her paralysis. She is. She's also terrified about all this, but she's trying not to show it. She keeps making jokes about becoming a grandmother in the most unconventional way possible. How is she with me being involved? Amani hesitated. She's protective. She wants to make sure you're not going to disappear if things get complicated, or try to control my decisions because you have more money and lawyers. Those are fair concerns. I told her you seem like a decent person who's been through his own tragedy. That seemed to help. Ethan looked out the window for a moment. I want to help, Amani. Not just financially but practically. Whatever you need, rides to appointments, someone to carry groceries, help with your mother's care, I want to be useful. Why? Because this baby is connected to both of us, and because you shouldn't have to go through this alone. Also, selfishly, because being involved makes me feel closer to Sarah somehow. Amani studied his face, looking for hidden motives or red flags. But all she saw was sincerity and a grief that matched her own confusion. Okay, she said finally. But I have conditions. Name them. First, no trying to influence my decisions about the pregnancy or the baby. I'm still figuring out what I want, and I need space to do that without pressure. Agreed. Second, if I decide to continue the pregnancy, you respect that this is my body and my medical care. You can be involved, but you don't get to override my choices. Absolutely. Third, we keep this between us for now. No media, no publicity, no turning this into some kind of human interest story. Ethan's expression grew serious. That might be harder than you think. If word gets out about the clinic's mistake, there's going to be attention whether we want it or not. Then we deal with that if it happens. But we don't create it. Fair enough. Any other conditions? Amani thought for a moment. I want to know more about Sarah. Not just the highlight reel but the real person. If I'm carrying part of her genetic legacy, I want to understand what that means. Ethan's eyes filled with tears. He quickly blinked away. I'd like that too. As they prepared to leave, Ethan reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. I know you said you didn't want money, but I've set up an account to cover all your medical expenses and anything else you need during the pregnancy. No strings attached, no conditions. Just, please let me help. Amani stared at the envelope. Ethan, I can't. Yes, you can. This situation is my responsibility as much as the clinic's. You shouldn't suffer financially because of decisions I made. This feels like too much. Taking care of the mother of my child feels like too little. The words hung in the air between them, loaded with implications neither of them was ready to fully explore. Amani was carrying his child, but she wasn't the mother of his child in any traditional sense. Yet here they were, two strangers bound together by the most intimate possible connection. I'll think about it, she said finally, taking the envelope. That's all I ask. As Amani walked back to her car, she realized something had shifted during their conversation. The anger and fear that had dominated her thoughts for weeks were still there, but they were sharing space with something new, the beginning of trust. She was still facing an impossible situation, still carrying a baby she'd never planned to conceive. But for the first time since this nightmare began, she felt like she had an ally rather than an adversary. That night, she called her mother to tell her about the meeting. So what do you think of him? Rose asked. I think he's a good man who's been through hell and is trying to do the right thing in an impossible situation. That's exactly what you are too, baby girl. What do you mean? I mean, maybe you two were brought together by this mess for a reason. Maybe you can help each other figure out how to heal. Amani touched her stomach, thinking about the tiny life growing inside her that connected her to a man she barely knew and a woman she'd never met. Maybe Mama. Maybe we can. The first time Ethan came to her apartment, Amani was mortified. The building was old, the hallways smelled like cooking and cleaning products, and her front door had 3 different locks because the neighborhood wasn't exactly safe. Compared to what she imagined his life looked like, her tiny one-bedroom felt like a dollhouse. But Ethan didn't seem to notice any of that. He was too busy being charmed by Rose. So you're the young man who's been taking my daughter to all these fancy doctor appointments, Rose said from her wheelchair, giving Ethan the kind of thorough inspection that had intimidated Amani's high school boyfriends. Yes, ma'am. I hope that's all right with you. Depends. What are your intentions with my grandchild? Amani nearly choked on her water. Mama. But Ethan took the question seriously. My intention is to support Amani in whatever decisions she makes and to be the best father I can be if she decides to let me be part of the baby's life. Rose studied him for a long moment. You seem like a decent man. But decent men can still disappoint you when things get hard. You're right. All I can do is promise to try my best and hope that's enough. Fair enough. Amani, show this boy where we keep the good glasses. If he's going to be around, he might as well know how we do things. Over the next few weeks, Ethan became a regular presence in their lives. He drove Amani to prenatal appointments when her car was being repaired. He brought groceries when she was too exhausted from morning sickness to shop. He sat with Rose when Amani had evening classes, listening to her stories about nursing school and asking thoughtful questions about her physical therapy. He's good people, Rose told Amani one evening after Ethan had left. Polite, helpful, doesn't act like his money makes him better than us. I like him too, Amani admitted. More than I expected to. You sound surprised. I am. I thought he'd be different. Entitled, controlling, trying to buy his way into getting what he wanted. And instead, Amani considered the question. Instead, he feels like a friend, I guess. Someone I can trust. The friendship deepened during her second trimester when the morning sickness finally eased and she had energy to do more than just survive each day. Ethan started joining her for walks around the neighborhood, partly because her doctor recommended exercise and partly because they both enjoyed the conversations. Tell me about your business, Amani said one afternoon as they strolled through a small park near her apartment. It's complicated to explain without getting technical. Try me. I'm not as dumb as I look. Ethan laughed. You don't look dumb at all. You look like someone who could probably run my company better than I do. Flattery will get you everywhere. Now explain. Basically, we create software that helps small businesses compete with larger corporations. Things like inventory management, customer relationship systems, marketing tools, stuff that used to be so expensive only big companies could afford it. Amani was quiet for a moment, processing. So you're trying to level the playing field? Exactly. Sarah always said that everyone deserves a fair chance to succeed, regardless of their resources. Is that why you started the company? Partly. Also because I was good at coding and terrible at everything else. Ethan kicked a small stone as they walked. What about you? What do you want to do after you graduate? I want to work with families in crisis. Parents who are overwhelmed, kids who are acting out, situations where everyone wants things to get better but no one knows how to make that happen. Like what you're living through now? Amani glanced at him. Yeah, actually. Turns out personal experience is a hell of a teacher. They walked in comfortable silence for a while, both lost in their own thoughts. The autumn air was crisp, and Amani could feel the baby moving gentle flutters that were becoming more frequent and noticeable. Can I ask you something? Ethan said eventually. Sure. Are you happy? About the pregnancy, I mean. It was a question Amani had been avoiding, even in her own mind. I don't know if happy is the right word. I'm still angry about how it happened. But the baby itself. She paused, trying to find the right words. I'm starting to feel protective of it. Connected to it. That's natural. Is it? I keep wondering if what I'm feeling is real maternal instinct or just the result of hormones and circumstance. Ethan stopped walking and turned to face her. Does it matter? You're growing a human being inside your body. However you feel about that is valid. Even if I'm not sure I want to be a mother? Especially then. Sarah always said that the best parents were the ones who questioned whether they were ready, because it meant they took the responsibility seriously. Amani felt tears prick her eyes. Pregnancy had made her emotional about everything, but this felt different. You always know exactly what to say. I don't know anything. I'm just trying to be the kind of person Sarah would have wanted me to be. I wish I could have met her. I wish you could have too. She would have loved helping you get ready for the baby. She probably would have knitted blankets and bought way too many tiny clothes. They resumed walking, but something had shifted between them. The conversation felt more intimate, more honest than their previous talks. Ethan? Yeah. Thank you. For everything you've done, but also for making this feel less scary. Thank you for letting me be part of it. That evening, Amani sat in her bedroom with her laptop, working on her thesis while the baby did what felt like gymnastics in her increasingly rounded belly. Her phone buzzed with a text from Ethan. How are you and the little one doing tonight? She smiled as she typed back, active. I think this kid is going to be a soccer player like Sarah taught. Or a dancer like its mom. Amani paused, staring at the message. I'm not a dancer. You move like one when you think no one's watching. The observation was so personal, so tender that it made her breath catch. When had he been watching her move? When had she stopped noticing him watching? Get some rest, he texted. Both of you need your sleep. Good night, Ethan. Good night, Amani. As she put her phone aside and tried to focus on her work, Amani realized that somewhere over the past few months, Ethan Blake had become more than just the biological father of her baby. He'd become someone she looked forward to seeing, someone she trusted with her fears and hopes, someone who made her laugh even on the hardest days. The thought should have scared her. Instead, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. The phone call came at 6 in the morning, jolting Amani out of the deepest sleep she'd had in weeks. Rose's voice was tight with pain. Baby girl, I need you to call 911. Something's wrong with my back. Amani was out of bed and moving before she was fully awake. Rose had been having more pain lately, but she usually managed it with medication and physical therapy. For her to ask for emergency help meant something was seriously wrong. I'm calling now, Mama. Are you okay? Can you breathe? I can breathe, but I can't move without feeling like someone's stabbing me with a knife. The next few hours were a blur of paramedics, hospital waiting rooms, and doctors with serious expressions. Rose had developed a severe infection around one of the surgical sites from her original spinal injury. She needed immediate surgery and at least a week in the hospital. I'm so sorry, baby, Rose whispered from her hospital bed as they prepped her for surgery. This is the last thing you need right now. Amani squeezed her mother's hand. Don't you dare apologize. You just focus on getting better. As Rose was wheeled into surgery, Amani sank into a waiting room chair and realized she'd been so focused on her mother that she'd forgotten to let anyone know what was happening. Her phone had been buzzing with missed calls and texts. 3 messages from Ethan. Good morning. How are you feeling today? Haven't heard from you. Everything okay? Getting worried. Please text me back. She called him and he answered on the first ring. Amani? What's wrong? Just hearing his voice made her start crying. My mom's in surgery. There's an infection and they don't know how serious it is and I can't lose her, Ethan. I can't do this without her. Where are you? Northwestern Memorial. But you don't have to. I'm already in my car. I'll be there in 20 minutes. He was there in 15, still wearing pajama pants under his coat and carrying 2 cups of coffee and a bag of pastries from the hospital cafeteria. Have you eaten anything today? Amani shook her head, suddenly realizing she was starving. I forgot. The baby needs you to eat even when you're scared. He handed her a blueberry muffin and guided her to a quieter corner of the waiting room. Tell me what happened. As she explained about Rose's infection and the emergency surgery, Ethan listened without interrupting, his presence steady and calming. When she started crying again, he pulled her against his shoulder and let her sob into his sweater. She's the strongest person I know, Amani said when she could speak again. But she's been through so much already. Her body is tired. She's also stubborn as hell and completely devoted to you. She's not going anywhere. You don't know that. You're right. I don't. But I know she's been fighting for you her whole life, and now she has a grandchild to fight for too. They sat together for 4 hours until the surgeon finally emerged with good news. The infection was serious but treatable. Rose would need antibiotics and extended physical therapy, but she was going to be fine. Can I see her? She's still groggy from anesthesia, but yes. Just for a few minutes. Rose looked small and fragile in the hospital bed, but her eyes lit up when she saw Amani. How's my grandbaby? Worried about grandma. Tell that baby that grandma is too stubborn to die. Especially now that I've got someone to spoil. Ethan stepped into view and Rose's expression grew thoughtful. You came. Of course I came. Even though Amani's not your wife or girlfriend or anything official? Mama, Amani warned, but Rose held up her hand. I need to know where his loyalties are. If he's going to be part of our lives, I need to know he'll show up when things get hard. Ethan met her gaze steadily. Mrs. Carter, I can't promise I'll never disappoint you or Amani. But I can promise that I'll always try to be here when you need me. Rose studied him for a long moment, then nodded. That's all anyone can promise. Now both of you go home and get some rest. I'm not going anywhere. As they walked to the parking garage, Amani felt drained but also grateful. Thank you for coming. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. You and Rose are. He paused, searching for the right words. You're important to me. Both of you. Even though we're not family? Ethan stopped walking and turned to face her. Aren't you? I mean, I know this isn't a traditional situation, but you're carrying my child. Your mother is going to be that child's grandmother. If that's not family, what is? The words hung between them, loaded with implications that neither of them was ready to fully examine. They were family, but not in any way that had a name or precedent. I should get home, Amani said finally. I need to call Rose's insurance company and figure out what her extended care is going to cost. Let me help with that. Ethan, you can't pay for everything. I'm not trying to pay for everything. I'm trying to take care of my family. There was that word again. Family. It shouldn't have felt so right coming from him, but it did. We'll talk about it tomorrow, Amani said, too exhausted to argue. Fair enough. Can I drive you home? You look dead on your feet. I can manage. Amani. Let me help. She was too tired to protest. As Ethan drove her home through the Chicago traffic, she dozed against the passenger window, one hand resting on her growing belly. When they reached her building, he walked her to her door. Will you be okay tonight? I could stay on the couch if you want company. The offer was tempting. The apartment would feel empty without Rose's presence, and Amani wasn't looking forward to spending the evening alone with her worries. I'll be fine. But thank you. Call me if you need anything. Even if it's just to talk. I will. As she watched him drive away, Amani realized that somewhere over the past few months, Ethan Blake had become the person she turned to in crisis. Not just because he was connected to her pregnancy, but because he'd proven himself reliable, caring, and genuinely invested in her well-being. The thought should have worried her. Instead, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. The call came from Tom Walsh, Amani's lawyer, on a Tuesday morning when she was visiting Rose in the hospital. Rose was doing much better, complaining about the food and flirting with the physical therapist, which meant she was back to her normal self. Amani, we need to talk. Can you come to my office this afternoon? Is everything okay? The clinic situation has gotten more complicated. There are things you need to know. Amani felt her stomach clench. What kind of things? The kind we shouldn't discuss over the phone. She arranged for a neighbor to sit with Rose and called Ethan to let him know about the meeting. He was at Tom's office when she arrived, looking as worried as she felt. Tom Walsh's office was nothing like the fancy conference room where she'd first met Ethan. Cramped, cluttered with case files and decorated with law school diplomas and family photos, it felt more honest somehow. Before I begin, Tom said, I want you both to understand that what I'm about to tell you changes everything about your situation with the clinic. Amani and Ethan exchanged glances. Just tell us, Amani said. Tom opened a thick file and pulled out several documents. The clinic's error wasn't an accident. It was negligence on a massive scale, and they've been covering it up from the beginning. What do you mean covering it up? Ethan leaned forward. I mean they knew their system was compromised for weeks before your procedures were scheduled. They had warnings about database corruption, staff concerns about patient safety protocols, and at least 3 other mix-ups that they managed to catch before any procedures were performed. Amani felt sick. So they knew this could happen? They knew it was likely to happen. And instead of shutting down procedures until the system was fixed, they decided to proceed because they had paying clients scheduled and didn't want to lose revenue. Jesus Christ, Ethan muttered. Tom continued. It gets worse. After your procedure, Amani, they realized what had happened within hours. But instead of immediately contacting you and Mr. Blake, they spent 3 days consulting with lawyers about liability exposure. 3 days. Amani's voice rose. They knew I was pregnant with the wrong baby for 3 days before they told me? That's correct. And during those 3 days, they destroyed several pieces of evidence and coached staff members on what to say if questioned. The room was silent except for the sound of Amani's breathing, which was coming faster and more shallow. There's more, Tom said gently. We've discovered that this clinic has a history of cutting corners on safety protocols. There have been at least 6 other incidents in the past 2 years, none as severe as yours, but all involving failures of their identification and tracking systems. Ethan stood up and started pacing. How is this place still operating? Money and lawyers. They've been settling cases quietly and getting non-disclosure agreements. Your situation is the first one that's gone public. What does this mean for us? Amani asked. It means you have grounds for a lawsuit that could result in substantial damages. Not just for medical expenses and emotional distress, but for punitive damages designed to prevent this from happening to other patients. Amani looked at Ethan, who had stopped pacing and was staring out the window. What do you think? I think they destroyed your life and tried to cover it up. I think they need to be held accountable. But a lawsuit means publicity. Media attention. Our private situation becoming public knowledge. Tom nodded. That's the downside. If you proceed with a major lawsuit, this story will probably become national news. The clinic will fight hard and they'll try to make both of you look bad in the process. How would they make us look bad? Ethan asked. They'll paint you as a rich man trying to buy a baby, and they'll paint Amani as a poor woman trying to get rich off an accidental pregnancy. They'll question your motives, your character, your relationship with each other. Amani felt the baby kick as if responding to her stress. I don't want that. I don't want our child to grow up with this as a public story. On the other hand, Tom continued, if you don't pursue legal action, the clinic will likely continue operating the same way. Other women could go through what you went through. The weight of that responsibility settled on Amani's shoulders. She thought about other women signing up for research studies, trusting that they would be safe, never imagining they could end up accidentally pregnant with a stranger's baby. How much time do we have to decide? A few weeks. But the longer we wait, the harder it becomes to build a strong case. After they left Tom's office, Amani and Ethan sat in his car in the parking garage, both lost in thought. What do you want to do? Ethan asked finally. I want to pretend none of this ever happened. I want to go back to my normal life and forget that there are people out there who thought it was okay to violate my body and then cover it up. But I keep thinking about the next woman who might sign up for a study at that clinic. What if she's not as strong as I am? What if she doesn't have people to support her? Ethan reached over and took her hand. Whatever you decide, I'll support you completely. Even if it means our personal business becomes public? Even then. This isn't just about us anymore. Amani closed her eyes, trying to imagine what Sarah would have done in this situation. From everything Ethan had told her, Sarah had been someone who cared about protecting others, even when it was difficult. Okay, she said finally. Let's do it. Let's make sure this never happens to anyone else. Ethan squeezed her hand. Are you sure? No. But I'm sure it's the right thing to do. As they drove back toward her apartment, Amani felt a strange sense of relief. The decision to pursue legal action felt scary and overwhelming, but it also felt like taking control of a situation that had been controlling her. For the first time since this whole nightmare began, she wasn't just reacting to other people's choices. She was making a choice of her own. And she wasn't making it alone. The media attention started small, a brief mention in the Chicago Tribune about a malpractice lawsuit against a local fertility clinic. But by the end of the week, it had exploded into a national story. Fertility clinic mix-up results in accidental pregnancy was trending on social media, and reporters were calling Amani's apartment at all hours. She and Ethan had agreed to do one joint interview with a reputable journalist to control the narrative, but even that felt overwhelming. Sitting in the TV studio under bright lights, with cameras pointed at them and a reporter asking increasingly personal questions, Amani felt exposed and vulnerable. Miss Carter, how has this experience changed your relationship with Mr. Blake? Amani glanced at Ethan, who nodded encouragingly. They discussed how to answer questions about their relationship, but the truth was complicated. Ethan has been incredibly supportive. What started as a terrible situation has become, well, we've become close friends. Mr. Blake, you were planning to have a child through surrogacy with your late wife's genetic material. How do you feel about Miss Carter carrying that child instead? Ethan's answer was careful, rehearsed. Obviously, this isn't what Sarah and I planned. But Amani has been gracious and generous in allowing me to be part of the pregnancy. I'm grateful for that. Are you planning to raise the child together? The question hung in the air between them. They'd been avoiding this topic, focusing instead on the lawsuit and getting through the pregnancy. But with the baby due in just 6 weeks, decisions needed to be made. We're still discussing what's best for everyone involved, Amani said diplomatically. After the interview, they sat in Ethan's car in the studio parking lot, both emotionally drained. That was harder than I expected, Amani said. The questions about our relationship were particularly awkward. Because we don't know what our relationship is. Ethan turned to look at her. Don't we? The question was loaded with months of unspoken feelings. Amani had been trying not to examine too closely how much she'd come to depend on Ethan, how much she looked forward to seeing him, how natural it felt when he put his arm around her shoulders or held her hand during difficult moments. Ethan, I know this is complicated. I know the circumstances are unusual. But somewhere over the past 8 months, you've become the most important person in my life. Amani's heart started beating faster. Because of the baby? Because of you. The baby brought us together, but you're the one who made me want to stay. They'd been moving toward this moment for weeks, maybe months. The gentle touches that lasted a little too long, the conversations that went deeper than necessary, the way they seemed to fit together despite the impossible circumstances that had brought them together. I'm scared, Amani admitted. Of what? Of this being about gratitude or obligation or the baby instead of us. Ethan reached over and cupped her face in his hands. Look at me. What do you see? Amani looked into his eyes and saw tenderness, warmth, and something that looked very much like love. I see someone who's been incredibly kind to me. I see someone who's been incredibly strong. Someone who took an impossible situation and handled it with more grace and wisdom than anyone had a right to expect. Someone who makes me laugh and challenges me to be better and has made me feel alive again for the first time since Sarah died. What about Sarah? What about your grief? Sarah will always be part of me. But she's gone and I'm still here. And somehow, you've helped me realize that I can honor her memory while still building a new life. Amani felt tears sliding down her cheeks. I never expected to fall in love with you. Is that what this is? Yeah, I think it is. Ethan leaned forward and kissed her, gentle and tentative at first, then deeper as she responded. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. So what do we do now? Amani asked. Now we figure out how to be a family. All 3 of us. 4 of us. Don't forget my mother. Ethan laughed. Rose would never let me forget her. That evening, they sat in Amani's living room with Rose, who had finally been released from the hospital and was back to her normal, opinionated self. It's about time you two figured out what everyone else could see months ago, Rose said when they told her about their feelings for each other. Everyone else? Baby girl, that man has been looking at you like you hung the moon since the second time he came over here. And you've been glowing around him in a way that has nothing to do with pregnancy hormones. Amani and Ethan exchanged glances and started laughing. So you approve? Ethan asked. I approve of anything that makes my daughter happy. But I have some questions about logistics. Such as where you planning to live, how you planning to raise this baby, and whether you're going to make an honest woman of my daughter. Mama? But Ethan took the question seriously. I want to marry Amani. Not because of the baby but because I love her. But I want her to finish school first, and I want us to have time to build our relationship without the pressure of legal obligations. Rose nodded approvingly. That's a good answer. Shows you're thinking long-term. As the evening went on, they talked about practical matters. Ethan's house had plenty of room for all of them, including accommodations for Rose's wheelchair. Amani could finish her degree while taking care of the baby. They could figure out the rest as they went. Are you okay with this happening so fast? Amani asked Ethan later when Rose had gone to bed. Nothing about our relationship has happened fast. We've been building toward this for months. But the marriage proposal wasn't a proposal. It was a declaration of intent. When I actually propose, you'll know it. Amani curled up against his side on the couch, her hand resting on her very pregnant belly. I love you too, you know. I was hoping you'd say that. Even though I come with complications? Especially because you come with complications. Easy love isn't worth much. As they sat together in the quiet apartment, feeling the baby move between them, Amani marveled at how her life had changed. 8 months ago, she'd been a struggling graduate student with a simple plan. Now she was in love with a man she'd met under the most unusual circumstances, carrying a baby that belonged to both of them in different ways, and facing a future that was completely different from anything she'd imagined. But for the first time since this whole journey began, different didn't feel terrifying. It felt like possibility. The contractions started at 3 a.m. on a Tuesday, exactly 1 week before Amani's due date. She'd been having false alarms for days, but this time felt different. More urgent, more real. Ethan, she whispered, shaking his shoulder. He'd been staying at her apartment more and more often as her due date approached, sleeping on the couch despite her protests that he should go home to his comfortable bed. Is it time? I think so. Within an hour, they were at the hospital, Rose directing traffic from her wheelchair while Ethan carried bags and Amani tried to breathe through increasingly intense contractions. This baby is coming fast, the nurse said after checking Amani's progress. You're already 6 centimeters dilated. Is that good or bad? Ethan asked, looking slightly panicked. It's normal for some women. Looks like your baby is eager to meet you. The next 8 hours were a blur of pain, exhaustion, and excitement. Ethan held Amani's hand through every contraction, whispering encouragement and reminding her to breathe. Rose coached from her wheelchair beside the bed, drawing on her years as a nurse to help guide Amani through the most intense experience of her life. You're doing amazing, Ethan said during a brief break between contractions. Sarah would be so proud of how strong you are. Instead of feeling jealous at the mention of his late wife, Amani felt comforted. Sarah's presence had become part of their story, not a threat to it but a foundation that had helped build their love. One more big push, the doctor said. I can see the head. Amani gathered every ounce of strength she had left and pushed with everything in her. The relief was immediate and overwhelming as the baby slipped free. It's a girl, the doctor announced. The tiny, perfect human was placed on Amani's chest, screaming and covered in vernix but absolutely beautiful. Amani started crying immediately, overcome by a rush of love so intense it took her breath away. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Look at her." Ethan was crying too, reaching out to stroke the baby's tiny hand with one finger. "She's perfect. She's absolutely perfect." "What's her name?" the nurse asked. Amani and Ethan looked at each other. They'd discussed names but never settled on anything definitive. "Hope," Amani said suddenly. "Her name is Hope." "Hope Sarah Carter Blake," Ethan added, and Amani nodded through her tears. "That's perfect," Rose said from her wheelchair, tears streaming down her face. "That's exactly what she is. Hope for all of us." The next few hours were a whirlwind of tests, measurements, and paperwork. Hope was healthy 7 pounds 2 ounces with a strong cry and perfect reflexes. She had Ethan's dark hair and what looked like it might become Amani's brown eyes. "She looks like both of you somehow," Rose observed when they were finally alone in the recovery room. "Like she was always meant to be yours." Amani held her daughter and she was her daughter, in every way that mattered, and marveled at how right everything felt. This baby had come into existence through medical error and institutional negligence, but she was perfect and wanted and loved beyond measure. "I can't believe she's ours," Amani whispered to Ethan as he sat beside her hospital bed. "I can't believe any of this. 9 months ago I thought my life was over. Now I have a daughter and the woman I love, and everything feels possible. What do you think Sarah would say if she could see us now?" Ethan was quiet for a moment, considering. "I think she'd say that love finds a way, even when we can't see the path. I think she'd be happy that her genetic legacy gets to grow up in a family full of love." 3 months later they were back in a courthouse, but this time for a much happier reason. The malpractice lawsuit had been settled out of court for a substantial sum that would ensure Hope's college education and provide security for all of them. More importantly, the clinic had been forced to implement new safety protocols and oversight measures that would prevent similar accidents from happening to other families. But today wasn't about the past. Today was about the future. Amani stood in the courthouse lobby wearing a simple white dress, holding 3-month-old Hope while Rose fussed with her flowers. Ethan looked handsome in a dark suit, but more than that he looked happy. Genuinely, completely happy. "Are you ready?" he asked, taking her free hand. "I've been ready since the day you first held my hand in that conference room and made me feel like I wasn't facing this alone." The ceremony was small and simple. Just the 4 of them, Amani, Ethan, Hope, and Rose, with Tom Walsh as their witness and a judge who had heard their story and insisted on performing the ceremony himself. "Marriage is about many things," the judge said as they exchanged vows. "Love, commitment, partnership, family. But at its core it's about choosing to face life's uncertainties together. You two have already proven you can do that under the most extraordinary circumstances. I have no doubt you'll do it under ordinary ones too." When the judge pronounced them husband and wife, Ethan kissed Amani while Hope gurgled contentedly between them. "I love you, Mrs. Blake," Ethan whispered against her lips. "I love you too, Mr. Blake." As they left the courthouse, Rose wheeling beside them while Ethan carried Hope and Amani held onto his arm, they looked like what they were. A family that had been built from impossible circumstances but was held together by very real love. "So what now?" Amani asked as they stood on the courthouse steps in the autumn sunshine. "Now we go home," Ethan said. "We raise our daughter, we build our life together, and we remember that the best things sometimes come from the most unexpected places. Even medical malpractice? Even medical malpractice." That evening, in their new house, Ethan's house that had become their home, Amani sat in the nursery feeding Hope while Ethan finished some work in his office. Rose was in the living room watching her evening shows, grumbling good-naturedly about the plot holes in her favorite crime drama. It was an ordinary moment in what had become an extraordinary life. 9 months ago, Amani had been a struggling graduate student with no romantic prospects and a clear but narrow view of her future. Now she was a wife, a mother, a woman who had learned that love could grow in the most unlikely soil. Hope finished nursing and fell asleep in her arms, tiny and perfect and completely trusting. Amani looked down at her daughter's peaceful face and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. Not for the medical error that had brought them together, that would always be a violation she wouldn't forget. But for the love that had grown from it, for the family they had become, for the future that stretched ahead of them full of possibility. "Thank you," she whispered to the sleeping baby. for teaching me that family isn't about how you start. It's about how you choose to love each other every day. Ethan appeared in the doorway, smiling at the sight of his wife and daughter. How are my girls? Perfect, Amani said, and for the first time in her life she meant it completely. We're absolutely perfect. Dear readers, thank you for taking this incredible journey with Amani, Ethan, and Little Hope. Their story proves that love can bloom in the most unexpected circumstances, and that family is defined not by how it begins, but by the love and commitment that sustains it. I'd love to hear from you. What did you think of Amani and Ethan's unique love story? Which moment in their journey touched you the most? How do you think their relationship will continue to grow as Hope gets older? What would you have done in Amani's situation? Do you believe that everything happens for a reason, or that we create meaning from random events? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. Your engagement helps me understand what resonates with readers and inspires future stories.